This week on Forward.
For me, establishing the Forward Party as a permanent party in Pennsylvania seemed like a doable mission and something that I was very, very excited to take on. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I can make a huge difference in how Pennsylvania moves forward. But if I'm not elected, I can also make a difference in moving the Forward Party forward. And that's also very exciting for me.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Forwardist candidate for Attorney General in the great state of Pennsylvania. Drumroll, please, Eric Settle. Eric,
Hey.
welcome.
Hey, Andrew, how you doing? It's great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you, my friend. I mean, you are blazing a trail in an incredible way, running statewide in Pennsylvania for Attorney General. And people who keep up with my mailing list have seen a little bit about the pitch, which is, wouldn't it be great if you had someone in charge of enforcing laws that didn't have a party jersey on?
Yeah, Andrew, I have to tell you, I had a lot of fun with that. I really appreciate the blog you put out there. The headline is sort of, who's Eric Settle and why should I care? And the answer you explained is that, in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania seems to be the keystone, no pun intended, to the presidential election, having an independent attorney general who is the next attorney general in Pennsylvania gets sworn in on January 17th. So though we hope that all of this will be behind us by January 17th, it's very possible it's not. And and to have somebody who's not wearing one of the jerseys to help defend the outcome of the election, to make sure it's a fair outcome, whatever that outcome is, wouldn't it be a better idea? And I must tell you, your followers were engaged, and my phone blew up with lots of small dollar donations, including some not so small. And I really appreciate it. It really, it was quite meaningful to me for you to take the time to write about me and saying something that resonated with people, frankly, around the country and around the world. We had to give that donation back.
I guess Eric Adams could have taken a lesson from you in terms of saying, hey, foreign national, not so good. So Eric, you deserve it, man. I mean, you stepped up in a very, very big way. And you and I met a number of months ago in Philadelphia. But I'd love for you to share with people a bit of your background, because you're the real deal. I mean, you were a freaking deputy attorney or deputy general counsel for Governor Tom Ridge, and then you headed up current Democratic Governor Shapiro's transition committee in Health and Human Services, because you have a lot of experience in that domain. But give people a sense of your background.
Sure. So I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs. I went to Colgate University, and then also went to law school at George Washington in D.C. Came to Philadelphia, practiced law at two big law firms, a firm called Wolf Block and a firm called Fox Rothschild. And I then had the opportunity to go work for Tom Ridge, who was then governor of Pennsylvania, to be deputy general counsel to the governor. And I was given two major areas of responsibility: healthcare and environmental, two very big books. Yeah. And it allowed me to have a front row seat on all the legal issues related to healthcare in Pennsylvania and also environmental affairs. And so that was a great, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No, please. So I just wanted to have a sense of this. So it sounds like you were a very experienced attorney at this point. And then when Governor Ridge was looking, but how did you get connected? And wasn't it a pay cut, for example?
It was a pay cut. It's kind of a funny story. I always tell this, that I had been involved with the Bar Association, and I had been part of a conference with managing partners and young lawyer leaders to talk about quality of life. And I developed a relationship from that activity with a guy named David Gerard DiCarlo, who went on to be ambassador to Austria. And after the thing was over, he said, listen, I'm doing a fundraiser for a guy named Tom Ridge. It's $1,000 a person. I know as a young lawyer, that's too big a check, but write a check and come. And so I thought about it and I said, that makes a lot of sense. And so I wrote a check for $100. And I came to the event, and there I met Tom Ridge, but I also met a guy by the name of Paul Tufano. And Paul, unbeknownst to me, was being groomed to be general counsel to the governor. And so we began a relationship at that point, really what I call carefully planned happenstance. Just was asked to be in a room, and I walked in and met the right guy. And when Tom was elected governor, I sent a note to Paul congratulating him on becoming general counsel, and I didn't hear anything. And a few weeks later, I ran into a colleague of Paul's, and he says, "Are you thinking about going to Harrisburg?" And I said, "Well, I wrote a note to Paul, but I haven't heard anything." And so he got my resume to Paul, and Paul 2 days later calls me and says, A, thank you for the note, which means that he got it. He just didn't get to respond to it. And B, what are you doing for the next 3 or 4 years? And so that's really how I got my opportunity. And what had happened is I was both an experienced lawyer. I'd been practicing law for about 10 years at that point at 2 major law firms. But I also was involved in Republican politics. I was a young Center City Republican. And so I was both active with campaigns, but also had the credentials as a serious lawyer. So that combination gave me the opportunity to come to Harrisburg at a relatively young age. I was 34 at the time. And
yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's like, okay, so I'm thinking mid-30s, which you were.
Yeah, I was, mid-30s, so I was, given an opportunity and given responsibility over some very big areas.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, freaking health and environment. So were you married at that time?
I was. I got married right out of law school, and actually at the time I had 1 3-year-old and 1 baby. So I used to commute to Harrisburg every day. I lived as I do now, outside of the Philadelphia area, and commuted. What I did is I drove back and forth Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday, I stayed over in an inexpensive motel, was there on Thursday, and then Friday went back and forth. And it was, long before we had the ability of remote work. So it was exhausting, but it was incredibly satisfying because Governor Ridge was just a wonderful American, a great governor, and we got a lot of good stuff done. In other words, I was the lawyer who was in charge of putting together the Medicaid managed care program called Health Choices, which is now all over the Commonwealth, but also, frankly, all over the country. Medicaid managed care is a major program, and frankly, a step forward because what it does is it creates an incentive to help people stay healthy. And I think the state governments have figured that out, and I think the recipients are very happy. And I spent a number of years over the course of my career working on the insurance side in managed care for Medicaid.
I met Governor Ridge. He's got a sterling reputation for people of any party. I mean, and he's like one of the ultimate nonpartisan, bipartisan governors, just universally liked and admired. And I love your story about getting introduced to the general counsel, because I think going into rooms is a very valuable skill, particularly when you're young. Just show up to stuff, you know what I mean? And if there's a room where they're like, hey, it's 1,000, you'd be like, is it really 1,000?
Well, and in this case, my patron knew that, and this was back in the 90s, $1,000 was it's still a lot of money, but back then it was an enormous amount of money. But it was that
for a young professional,
event.
that's a lot. I mean, that would be a lot. And it's a lot in absolute terms. Yeah.
No, sure. But Andrew, I agree. I think I say all the time, it's like, you got to be in the room. Nothing happens if you're not in the room. And as I said, I have this expression called carefully planned happenstance, which is the ability of you put yourself in the right places and good things are going to happen. And I found that throughout my career that I have put myself, I would say inadvertently, but you sort of plan to be someplace good, and then you hope something happens. And in my case, I've been lucky enough that it happened a lot.
Hello, YouTube. Please do hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget, you can ask questions at mailbag@andrewyang.com. See you on the interwebs. This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the number one VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's EXPRESS vpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. Well, certainly you ran a department of 150 lawyers, which is an enormous responsibility. So how long were you at Harrisburg? It sounds like 3 or 4 years, or was he right?
I was there for 3 years. We like to joke that for those who commute from Philadelphia, you're good for 3 winters.
That
Three
makes
winters.
that makes perfect sense. So after doing a great deal for the state, what was your next move?
So I came out of government and I joined what was then Aetna US Healthcare. It was the recently merged Aetna Healthcare and US Healthcare together, and was given a responsibility. I was actually regional general counsel for 5 different states in 5 different regions. So I had a chance to travel around the country, which I both appreciated and hated, depending on how you feel about business travel. But I was given a lot of responsibility early on. And about a year or two into that, I started thinking about maybe getting back into public service, although the pay was better. And I joked that I had this list of things. I used to ride the train sometimes to Harrisburg, and I had this list of things that I would do once I was making money again. And those were things like fix screen door, paint house, replace car. I mean, basic kind of things. Because at this point, I was a dad with 2 little kids, mortgage and a spouse. And so despite making a little more money, I decided, you know what, I really am interested in maybe getting back into public service. And I actually looked at running for Congress in what was then the 13th Congressional District, kind of suburban Philadelphia. And I started talking to some of the local elected folks who people know me. And they encouraged me and they said, you'd be a good candidate. You're a young guy, young family, moderate Republican in southeastern Pennsylvania. And so I began the process. And then maybe about a month later, I was at my then 7-year-old son's soccer game. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? If I'm running for Congress, I'm at everybody else's kid's soccer game but my own. So I made a promise to myself. I said, for the next 20 years, I'm going to make money. I'm going to fix the screen door, paint the house. I'm going to save for college for my kids. I'm going to save for retirement for myself and my spouse. And if the opportunity presented itself in 20 years, I would then step back into public service. And when that moment fortunately came for me, the Republican Party of my youth and my career had morphed into the party of Trump. And it made me both uncomfortable and frankly unelectable.
I mean, it would, like, yeah. I mean, if you're a Tom Ridge Republican, you're like, what's this? What's going on with Trump? So, how did you wind up helping the Shapiro administration on the transition?
Right. So what we did is, as a guy who was slowly moving away from the Republican Party, I was part of a group that was called Republicans for Shapiro, which was a group of prominent Republicans who were supporting Josh Shapiro in his election for governor. And so we did that over the course of that year that it was going back now. I guess it was 2022. That's right. 2022. And so we did a nice job of getting him elected by a huge margin. And afterwards, they asked me if I would serve on the healthcare transition team, in the areas that I had expertise, which was healthcare. Because I had, along the way, I'd spent a number of years as a general counsel at a managed care company, and then as a senior counsel at another managed care company. So I fit in right there. And frankly, some of the issues that the governor had asked us to work on were issues that, frankly, I had worked on when I was in Harrisburg. And one of them was, which is an issue that I feel is very important, is access to care in rural areas. And the
Sure.
idea that you have these small hospitals that are struggling a little bit to make it, and the tension with the acquisition of those hospitals by for-profit entities. And, that issue was alive back in the 90s when I was in Harrisburg. And I was surprised to see that was still an issue of how do we deal with this? And one of the ideas that we talked about is, should the state support these? There are no public hospitals in Pennsylvania, but should the state support critical access care hospitals so that there is those care in those rural areas?
Oh yeah, man. They still haven't solved that problem, and that problem is going to be, unfortunately, with us for the duration. It's getting worse by some measures. You have healthcare deserts in a lot of rural areas. So that was relatively recently when Governor Shapiro won, and people I know think very, very highly of him. And so from there, you're now this incredibly experienced professional. You've worked in government. You've worked in the healthcare space. You probably know more about the ins and outs of that industry than just about anyone. And now you're running for attorney general for the state. And I got to say, when you and I met, I thought to myself, wow, this guy's like a real battle hardened vet. Like he's an excellent candidate in terms of experience and gravitas and background and everything else. And I'm thrilled that you decided to run as a forwardist. But it's clear, I think, to anyone listening to this why you would, because you are a very sane, competent Republican, and the Republican Party totally like morphed into something else, approximately 2016 or so.
Right.
And it sounds like that played out in Pennsylvania as well.
It did. I mean, that was how I was sort of feeling. I spent the first 5 years kind of hiding from my Republican friends. And then after a while, I felt like I needed to be involved. And it's interesting because I stayed a Republican these years because I wanted to see if I could make a difference as a Republican to try to make the Republican Party be sane again. And
Sure.
so the move to be a forwardist, to resign from the party, wasn't a hard decision. In fact, the day I formally resigned was the day that Elise Stefanik was talking about the January 6th hostages at a time when, and still now, there were hostages in Gaza. So and she's a rising star in the Republican Party. So with actually a light heart, said it's time to move forward and resigned from the party and became an independent. And look, the opportunity to help the party establish itself is a very meaningful thing. I've been very lucky in my life that I've been able to make a difference in the lives of Pennsylvanians. One of the things I'm most proud of is the work I did on autism, where I led a bipartisan effort to create a law that requires insurance companies to pay for services for kids with autism. It's one of
Amen.
the
You
best.
probably know I have a son who's autistic.
Oh, I didn't know that, Andrew. But and you'll appreciate this. I mean, this was the beginning of when states were doing insurance mandates that have to be done state by state. So we began in Pennsylvania, where we were lucky that we had a Speaker of the House who had an affected nephew. And so actually, with the help of not only that person, but also who was then Deputy Speaker Josh Shapiro, we got a major piece of legislation done, which has helped tens of thousands of kids. So when you have that opportunity to help, you look for the next challenge. And for me, establishing the Forward Party as a permanent party in Pennsylvania seemed like a doable mission and something that I
Yeah.
was very, very excited to take on. And also in a role, when you guys approached me and said, would you run for Attorney General? I sort of thought, you know what? I love that position. I worked with former attorney generals and current attorney generals. So it's something that makes a difference in Pennsylvania. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I can make a huge difference in how Pennsylvania moves forward. But if I'm not elected, I can also make a difference in moving the Forward Party forward. No double use of pun. And that's also very exciting for me.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready to eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast. You just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Oh yeah, I mean you're a true public servant in terms of spirit, Eric, and I love that you're mission driven in this way. I do want to spend a few moments talking about your years thinking, hey, maybe I can help the Republican Party return to sanity, because I know a lot of people who resemble that. And then a lot of them have also thrown in the towel, like Governor Christie Todd Whitman, who you've campaigned with. And, you know, we joke all the time that she wrote a book years ago called It's My Party Too, trying to fight for the soul of the Republican Party. And then we joke that if she wrote a sequel now, it would be called No, It's Not. Because, you know, and so she was part of an organization, Renew America, that that was trying to fight for sane Republicans, and then they gave up because there's a very, very, very thin layer of them, and then when you do try and get behind them, most of the time it doesn't work, or you know they lose. I mean, like this party has lost its way, and people who think that the party is going to sort of return to its senses, I think, are totally fooling themselves or deluding themselves.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'd always hoped that there was some possibility that things would get sane again. And there are people, there are people like Nikki Haley, who I think represents potentially a kind of a new way forward. But I really think I don't know. And walking away was a big deal. A lot of my Republican friends don't talk to me anymore, or they avoid me. And that's hard because they're still my friends. Sure. And, I worked very hard for many, many years, both locally and on national politics, to elect Republicans. But the Republican Party's just moved in a direction that's just so difficult now. And, I am optimistic that maybe in the post-Trump era, other leaders will get some traction, but I don't know.
That's a reasonable summary, Eric, and I like that approach. I try and be pragmatic in that way too. It's like, look, let's take multiple approaches and then see what's going to work. So my blog post on your race being potentially of national importance, which it totally is, was that Pennsylvania might decide the national election, and the gap between Biden and Trump last time was, let's call it 80,000 votes in Pennsylvania. Now, we have a number of benchmarks to hit where your campaign is concerned. It's possible that people show up and just vote en masse and say, you know what, I want a different type of leader. Getting on the ballot was no small feat. So congratulations on that level.
Thank you.
But to your point, if someone who's running on the forward line, gets 2% in the state, then that establishes Forward Party as a party in the state of Pennsylvania. And that, to me, is something that is very achievable thanks to your stepping up and running in a way that I'm sure a lot of people find very appealing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Andrew. It's interesting. There's a forum coming up in Pittsburgh on the 23rd of October, and they're including me. In other words, they're including obviously the two major candidates. And although there were several other minor party candidates running this time, they've included me in the program. And I think that's a message that says that the Forward Party represents something new, something different, and something is, as I talk about it when I'm talking to people, is a way to try to solve problems.
Yeah.
And I think, some of the other parties have, sort of, they're not really problem solvers. They're sort of thinking about certain issues that are very important to them, whether it's the Libertarians or the Greens or the Constitutional Party. But we're actually a party that says, look, we're going to be a little agnostic about issues. And we're going to say, hey, we know we have problems and we know we need to solve them. And we know we're not going to solve them from the extremes. So let's figure out a way to solve problems and move ahead. And I think that resonates with so many people. And as part of the obviously the petition drive, I mean, I spoke myself probably personally to several thousand people who signed our petitions. I mean, I was out there, and it's interesting because Governor Whitman came out with us one day, and just as we were about to sort of jump into the meeting of the public, I turned to her and I said, "How long has it been since you've done this?" And she looked at me and smiled. And she says, "It's been a while." And I said, I said, "I appreciate you being here." And with that, we jumped in. And Andrew, you were a candidate. You know that moment when you appear someplace and you just have to say, okay, I'm now going to engage and say, "Hi, I'm Eric Settle and I'm running for Attorney General." But before you do that, there's this moment where you're just a citizen, just a normal person standing in a park until you shift into candidate mode. And it's hard sometimes, but she was great. She was great. And she's coming back. She's coming back on October 26th. We're going to go back and meet some more people. And the one thing we know, the governor loves dogs. So if you have a dog, she's going to immediately talk to the dog first.
She is a dog person. I have been to the farm. Yeah, and I know well the kind it's almost like assuming an alter ego. It's like, it's candidate time. It's Eric Settle, Attorney General candidate. Time to go.
It's fun.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. What can you do that's going to make you happier, healthier, more energetic throughout the day? There's not much, but you know what really, really could make that kind of difference? Investing in a proper mattress. That's what I did with a Helix Sleep mattress. I took their personalized sleep quiz. I got a Dawn Firm mattress sent to my door. And not only has it made a difference in my health and energy, but it's also become my kids' favorite mattress, even though it wasn't ordered with them in mind. Maybe it's because they love me so much. No, it's actually because the mattress is better. And if you don't take my word for it, GQ, Wired, everyone agrees that Helix Sleep is the mattress pick if you want a better night's sleep. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. That's helixsleep.com/yang. With Helix, better sleep starts now.
Right. Although I will tell you, it's exhausting. There's kind of a point where you sort of say, okay, can I stay in this mode for another half hour, or do I get to turn it off? And look, one of the things about this for me, and I want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to do this, is that, I've been in and around politics my whole career, and it is fun to be the candidate. It is fun to engage with people. And I was just saying, we were doing a fair in Ambler, Pennsylvania this weekend. And you've made an impact on people. When I was leaving and they were leaving, they sort of waved goodbye and said, "Bye, Eric." And it's like, wow, I guess I must have made,
man.
I made an impression.
I think that they're including you in that forum because of who you are and the fact that you seem like a very serious problem solver and you could do a lot of good. People are like, oh, you know what? We should actually hear from Eric. I think you're having a real impact because of who you are, man. I mean, it's a real credit. You're a credit to us. You're a credit to your own family and self, really. I mean, it takes a lot to step up and lead in the way you're doing. I have donated to your campaign. I certainly encourage others to do so as well. Let your friends in Pennsylvania know that, hey, if you want to vote for like a genuinely independent, nonpartisan Ford attorney general, they can do so. And how can people help? Like, where do they go?
Well, all right. So obviously our website is Eric Settle, the number 4ag.com. You can sign up to you can do a couple things there. You can learn more about me. You can donate, which helps us have the resources to do the things we need to do. You can volunteer. We need people to both put lawn signs up on their property, but also to be around election day. Because one of the tricks to this election is we need 2%, but we need 2% in 10 counties. So if there are people in counties that are less obvious to us, and obviously the 5-county area outside of Philadelphia, the 3 or 4 counties outside of Pittsburgh, we have volunteers, we have lots of people, and we have volunteers all over the state. But we're focusing on some of the smaller counties where we can have an outsized impact to get our 2%. So if you're interested in getting involved, even just for a little while on election day, just for a few hours, let us know. Go to Eric Settle, the number 4ag.com, click on the volunteer button, let us know what's going on, and we'd love to get you signed up. And as I like to say, everybody can help me move Pennsylvania forward.
Yes, let's move Pennsylvania forward. And on election night, you and I will be together at the Forward Party National Watch Party, which is going to take place in your backyard in Philadelphia. And hopefully it'll be a lot of fun seeing the votes get tallied, your face with like an F next to it. Oh, the dream, man. It's been one of my dreams to have a candidate with an F next to their headshot. And then millions of people will be like, there's an F? Look it up. And that F is going to be Eric Settle, 4ag.com. Tell your friends in PA and let's make history. Pennsylvania, this is a chance to make political history thanks to Eric Settle and others who are stepping up to lead. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate your help and your support and for your time today. Thanks.
Eric Settle, 4ag.com.